Chapter 5. In the morning, the fires were started again, the smoke choking and malodorous. Although Peter's rules demanded that they leave the cellar to perform bodily functions outdoors, the place seemed to reek of excrement. Pots of water were set to boil, and in a while there was a bowl of hot water for each, and a piece of bread the size, Alex thought, of a crust he might leave on his plate in the morning or toss to the birds. Today was Kostya's turn to be in charge of food, and he measured out each piece carefully, feeling the responsibility of his charge. He would guard the cache all day to ensure there were no rule breakers. Now Alex could see that there were a pair of finches in the cellar with them, flying about, dining on hemp seed left in the little pile for them. How can they live down here, he wondered. Yet the boys do. Once he saw a small boy try and sneak some of the hemp seed for himself. Boris quickly thrashed him. Nygadzal, Nygadzai, good for nothing, he cried. The seed belonged to my bird, you hear? He saw Alex watch him and swaggered over. If you decide to stay and learn a trade, he said, you can learn from watching me. I'm the best. Right now, perhaps, we are small potatoes, but when I am fully grown in a few years, I shall be a really big crook. We will not just snatch things, we will rob by Kabur, thieves by digging tunnels from one building to another. We will be moles. It is very special work. He strolled over to his fire, holding one of the finches, which landed to eat hemp from his fingers. I shall really have to leave now, Alex thought, though his energy was low and he looked wearily for the boots he had left by the fire. They were gone. They must have been kicked away, was his first thought, and he crawled about among the children on the dirt floor looking for them. His search was observed, and laughter started to spread from fire to fire, the loudest laugh coming from close by. Is that a boy or a scabby dog you brought us, Peter? Boris asked in a voice that sounded as if it came from the sewers, deep and full of cracked, uneven notes. And there were the boots on the feet of his companion, Grigory, who looked more like a jackal than a boy, with his spotted face and pointed ears set high on his head. He was lying on his back, his boot-clad feet dancing in the air above him. All right, Alex laughed nervously. I'm leaving, and you may give me my boots. May I? Gregory tried to imitate Alex's voice. Hear that, Boris? I may give him his boots. I may also give you a black eye and a broken nose, you snot, you dryan. Changing his tone, he said, if you want something to cover your feet, help yourself from the pile of boots over there. And he pointed to the rags stacked in the corners. Alex was frightened. This was a bully far worse than any he had met in school, and there had been some. He thought he had learned how to deal with bullies. One tried not to act frightened, and he tried now. As a joke, it's all right, but you can't just take someone's things, he said, reasonably. The joke is over now, so give them back, please. Boris said, hear that, comrades? The Dryan tells you can't take someone's things. He now took the boots and put them on his own feet. Everyone laughed. Alex felt a wave of terror. Tell that to the Bolsheviks, Boris growled. Tell them they cannot take my father's little farm, burn the fields. Yes, tell them they can't take someone's things. Yes, tell them that, said Grigory, who seemed to be Boris's echo in shadow. They burned our house and all the furniture and stole the cow and the chickens. Cow, Leon said. Don't tell me about cows. The straw tax that my father paid took the food from our cow, and she grew so weak that we had to hold her onto her feet by binding strips of cloth around her and tying them to the stable roof beam. There she hung until she was so weak she died. After that, we had nothing. He blinked his pale eyelids. Peter, who had been silent during all this, now seemed to awaken with a start. How do you think we live? He barked. He answered his own question. We take what others have. That's how everyone lives, Kostya said. No, Alex said, holding hard to what he knew about life. My father did not live that way. Does not. He feared the past tense. Hear that, boys? Boris chortled. The father of the Dryan didn't live that way. Ain't that nice? And just how did this wonderful father live? Peter asked. He was an educator. He worked for the state. And who does the state take from? Asked Boris, triumphant. From my father, that's who. In fact, those may be my father's boots. So you see, it is quite right that I have them. Give him back his boots, Peter said, now quietly. We do not steal from each other. He is not one of us. He said so himself, Boris said. Give them back, Peter ordered, and Boris suddenly pulled off the boots and threw them at Alex. Where did Peter's authority come from, Alex wondered. He was not older or even as big as Boris. They were all in rags, and yet he thought there was something more about Peter. He wore his rags differently. Miska came and sat beside him as he put the boots on. Read the rest of the story before you go, he said, pushing the book at him. A few of the younger boys came closer at the suggestion. I can't, Alex muttered. I have to go. He went to Peter. Thank you, he said. We're even now, Peter said gruffly, but remember, when you go out, you are fair game for any of us, or any of the others out there, all over Moscow, who may not be as gentle as we. Gentle, Alex said, looking at the filthy roughnecks in their malodorous rags, listening to their clamorous arguments and fights. If you think we are rough, wait until you meet some of the others. I hope he does, Boris growled. Like Borin and his band, Kostya said, his sad, thin face looking almost pleased to be telling about it. They'll not just steal your boots and your coat, they'll carve your liver and eat it for supper. And he laughed in a way that sounded like wooden spoons hitting together, like a cough more than a laugh. Alex turned and went toward the boarded entry. He was unsteady on his feet, strangely light-headed. Peter came and moved the boards, then led him down the dark hallway to the stairway leading to the street, going ahead and signaling when the way was clear. Be alert, he warned as Alex reached the top of the stairway. Have eyes all around your head. Good luck. As the cold air hit Alex's lungs, an odd, blinding sensation came over him. His knees became unhinged and he fell like a rock in the snow. He faded in and out of consciousness, sometimes feeling the heat of the fire upon him, sometimes feeling only ice. But when he had fully regained consciousness, he knew he was back in the cellar. Miska was beside him, and there seemed to be only one or two other boys, one carrying water, one tending the fire. What happened? Alex asked Miska, his voice strange in his ears. I dreamed I had left this place. You left it, but you're back, Miska said. I think you came back to finish the story. Alex's mind went over his departure. It took him to the cellar door and stopped. You fell down, Miska said brightly, bringing him some hot water in a bowl. There's a special herb in it. Peter said to give it to you. Alex took the bowl and drank bitter-tasting water. Then he lay back again, feeling unable to sustain his weight. You're sick, Miska said, but probably you will not die. I know. I see how sickness is. Everyone is sick. Everyone is sick, Alex muttered, but they are all out in the cold now. Of course, we have to eat. If we don't go out, we'll be sicker. Then there will be some sickness that Peter will not let come into the cellar. Some very bad. He will not take those boys into the band. He will take them to the children's home if they want to go. Miska shuddered. And what does the children's home do with them? Oh, if they have room, they give them a place on the floor to sleep, and sometimes some food if they have any. If they are going to die, they can die there. Miska seemed neither worried nor affected by these facts. I was one once. Peter took me away. Alex drifted off to sleep again. When he awoke, there was the stir around him of many feet stomping in front of the rekindled fires, many voices bantering or arguing. There was coughing. Can't get rid of you after all, Peter said to Alex when he saw he was awake. How do you feel now? I feel strange, weak, hot and cold, Alex said. I'll give you more of our herbs for fever, Peter said, and went to a niche in the stone wall. There was a small amount of pepper salt, vodka, naphthol, cart grease, and some twists of newspaper containing herbs. He selected one, pouring boiling water over the contents, and let it steep some minutes. Later, when you're well, you will get some herbs to replace these, he said. That way we can keep our medicine chest stocked, and whoever has a fever can get some. Alex was too weary to ask where he was to find herbs in the middle of Moscow in winter, but he drank the brew and accepted a piece of black bread and later some cooked porridge. In the days that followed, as Alex lay on the floor of the cellar, sweating, then chilling, sleeping, and finally starting to feel better, he heard the comings and goings of the boys, and their habit of life became as familiar as his own. He saw the tattooed names on some of their arms. Leon's was Anatole, Kostya was Vladimir. When he asked, they only said they had not always been waifs, that Leon and Kostya were names of this life. Anatole and Vladimir were the names of that other life. He saw Ivan twisting bowls of the end of the stick, juggling stones, sometimes four in the air at once. He saw for himself why Kostya was sometimes called the dancer. When at night, in the dim light of the waning fire, he rose from his place on the floor and moved slowly, almost gracefully about. Once Alex had started to take hold of him, to guide him from the fire, but Peter had grabbed his arm. Don't touch him, he whispered. He will scream and waken everyone. Nothing happens to him. And nothing did. Alex saw, too, that Boris, who lounged by the fire whenever he was in the cellar, nevertheless slept standing up in a corner. He has to sleep that way, Kostya had explained. When Boris's family was burned out of their farm, Boris was taken by a rich kulak to work for him, a rich landed peasant. If he ever found Boris sleeping, he would beat him. So Boris learned to sleep standing up so he would look awake. Now he can't sleep any other way. As for Kostya, he had left home during the famine to look for some food. There was nothing, he said. What little flour we had, the soldiers requisitioned. When he got to Moscow, he was picked up in the great sweep that was conducted by the Commission of Social Welfare. They raided every place they could because of the public outcry against the wild children, and threw them into children's homes. When the homes could no longer hold another soul, they gave up the idea. Kostya escaped. I'd rather starve in the street than starve in that sewer, Kostya said, his face twitching. You see, we are heroes. Yes, only heroes live as we do. One night, in the quiet of the cellar, the light of the little fires fading, the cold settling deeply, Alex, lying by Peter, whispered, How did you find this cellar, Peter? Sleep, Peter said. Sleep is good for fevers. But my fever is getting better. Almost like a parent humoring a sick child, Peter said, All right, I'll tell you this much. I was hiding out in the city for a long time, longer than most of the boys in this band. My father was killed during the fighting, and my mother died in the famine, always giving my baby brother and me whatever there was to eat. My aunt took us to the children's home on Ostrov Street. It was terrible then, of course, but compared to the way it is now, I suppose it would not seem so bad. There were metal bunks and a blanket. There was usually gruel in the morning and cabbage soup at night. Stichi da kasha, pisha nasha, he sang in a falsetto. Cabbage soup and gruel, that's our food. Our popular ditty, or song. Now, his voice drifted off too. Then how did you get out? Alex prompted. Well, when I got old enough and smart enough, I would slip out for a few days at a time, get some food, and bring it back for my little brother. And one day, I came back and he was dead. He had been beaten.